We didn't just come from Tara. Everything comes into manifestation from non-manifestation, which means we come from Source, or God, into the primal sound fields, into the primal light fields. Then we start to enter density, like we talked about last night, through the D12 Christos template, which is at dimension 12. It's pre-matter, hydroplasm, liquid light. Then we move down into form. We literally have a genetic ancestry that goes all the way up to the primal light fields. We are part of a family line. And what's happening on our planet right now, particularly if you're paying attention to the channels in the New Age movement, everybody's talking Anunnakis these days. Pleiadians, by the way, happen to be Anunnaki. You ever see that on the websites? All the material that's coming out of channels, the Pleiadians. Oh, we created you, we're your space brothers and kind of space parents and this. They are trying to make sure we don't remember our ascendancy, because if we do, we'll remember how to activate our DNA. It helps to know that, first of all, there are a group of beings called the Breneau. The Breneau are in density 5. They exist as wave form. Density 5 is dimensions 15, 14, and 13. That's the primal light fields, the Kirche light fields. So they exist as living conscious light, as gestalts of light, conscious light. Every one of us, to get here, had to come through one of those, which means we have a part of our consciousness there as part of a Breneau. They also call them Rishi, Breneau Rishi. Now, the Breneau are called the founders because they are the ones that seeded life into this time matrix. 950 billion years ago was the last time a life wave was seeded here. It wasn't when this time matrix was created, but if we're going to calculate in terms of linear time, it would be 950 billion years ago that the last life wave, or the last wave of consciousness, came from Source to seed life in its time matrix. The Breneau are the founders in that they were the consciousness collectives that came in to the primal light fields and said, all right, we're gifted with the ability to create. What shall we create? What type of life form shall we create? There's a part of us that was a part of these collectives and made these decisions. For creating life forms wasn't simply to create something to play with. It was, what are we going to create ourselves as? Because just like God, Source, manifests itself, it is one quantity of energy, decides to experience manifestation, and it breaks itself down into various forms to experience what that means. The Breneau did the same. We are part of the product of that. So are the other life forms in this time matrix. So our genetic ascendancy comes from the Breneau founders in density 5, in the primal light fields. The next step down, if we're going to trace what's in our DNA template, now this is where you start to get differentiation. Other races went different ways, like Anunnaki are created in a completely different chain of genetic order. And it started from here, from density 4, which is dimensions 12, 11, and 10. They're the hydroplasmic liquid light fields, where you can actually take on form if you choose, but it's kind of like, what was it, the old Terminator movie where they had the silver guy who could melt himself down into a puddle and then turn himself back up? It's kind of like that. It's a form where you can take on form just by the thought. You can take on whatever form you desire by thinking that form, and your matter substance, which is pre-matter, will conform to that thought. There's a part of us stationed there right now. That's our Christos level self. There are Christos founders races that are in density 4, and there are many different types of them. The type that we came out of are called the Anuhazi. That's not Anunnaki. Anunnaki were created as the avengers of Anu. They were created to destroy the Anuhazi and their races. They were created as a reaction to our creation, not as an action unto itself. Doesn't mean they're evil. It means they got some problems, and they like to make them ours. But Anuhazi are Elohi Elohim. You hear the word Elohim a lot out there in different spiritual teachings. What most people don't realize is there are different families of Elohim. You have Elohi Elohim, who have retained their ascension codes. They've retained their connection to their Breneau families and to the Ascended Master collectives beyond the time matrix. There are Anu Elohim, who severed their connection, and they are literally running what is called an Anti-Krystos DNA template. It means they're running their fire letters or the sequences of frequency in their DNA in reverse, so they do not have to connect to the higher light fields. So they don't have to cooperate. They can go on their little dominion agendas and do whatever they want. If they were functioning right, if they weren't distorted in their consciousness because their DNA was distorted, they wouldn't do those things anyway. Because beings who are Christed, who keep their connection to the higher levels of identity, it doesn't come natural for them to cause harm to other life, because they know they're part of the one, and they know all things are part of the face of God. So there's a love that happens. But when a being has distortion in their manifestation template, which can happen kind of by accident, it's called code convolution. It's kind of like inbreeding here. If you have a small family that keeps having children together, you start getting mutations in the DNA templates that weren't expected or desired. That happened when the founders in density 5 and density 4 were creating new life fields. They had a limited selection for a while with their own life fields, and some of them had code convolution, which is like inbreeding. This is where the fallen races came from. And they were never hated or considered evil, but their actions had to be stopped because they were destroying other things in this time matrix. Now, we were not a fallen race. The story about the original sin, I'm not going to go into that right now because that would take too long for today, but it will be in the Voyagers Volume 2 update, the second printing of that. You're going to be surprised at where that came from. It started way before humans were even created. So there is a story about an original sin. And the simple sin was that what was done created mutations in the DNA templates of everything in this time matrix, because somebody blew up a Stargate on purpose. The original sin was blowing up Stargate 12, which was the density 4 Stargate. If that Stargate does not work, everything below it is stuck in the time matrix, and it can't ascend, and it can't get back out. That gate has been repaired since then. That was 250 billion years ago when that happened. That was before humans were created. But anyway, this is our lineup. Breneau founders races, Christos races, Anuhazi Elohi Elohim. What the Elohi Elohim look like are liquid light feline hominids. They are the cat people that some people are channeling. They're the felines. And they look hominid. They look kind of like human, but they have large, almond-shaped eyes, and they're quite pretty. Some of them actually have kitty-type faces. There really are kitty beings out there. It's like really weird when you start to realize not everything looks like we do here. They really do look different, some of them. But that's okay. And some of them that look different were actually created first, so we probably look stranger to them than they do to us. So we came out of the Anuhazi. Then when we came down, the next stage, after our gene code evolved into the Anuhazi Elohi Elohim, there was another level made where we could enter densities 1 through 4, not just up in the higher densities where you're made out of pre-matter, but we go all the way down in the densities and experience physical matter and semi-etheric and etheric matter. This race was called the Azarites. They had 48-strand templates, which is the highest you can have in this time matrix to actually activate a 48-strand template. Now, the Azarites are blue people too. They were actually the first blue people, and they were a combination that was a coevolution agreement between 3 different families of the Breneau founders that put their codes together and created kind of like a super race. They created it for a reason, to serve as guardians in this time matrix. They created it after the destruction of Stargate 12, because somebody had to be put on security patrol here before the fallen angelics totally ripped the whole time matrix apart. So the Azarites were created as the Azarite Universal Security Team. This is the lineage out of which humans came as we came down the chain.